you guys all look great up here. You
So
let
do
me
you,
know.
Melissa.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. First of all, thank you everybody for coming today and celebrating Pathways to Success, part of Innovare's Elevation series, where we support, build, and encourage community building for successes, journeys, and stories of individuals that have inspirational and leadership opportunities that bring to the Mohawk Valley. They say, well, not they, John Quincy Adams says that if your actions inspire others to dream more, do more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. For the next hour, I am honored to hear from 7 of the Mohawk Valley's inspiring leaders within their industry and celebrate their pathways to success. Let's make the most of our time. Heather, if you could start us off and introduce yourself.
I would be happy to. Thank you, Melissa. I'm Heather Hage, and I'm the president and CEO of the Griffiss Institute. I grew up here in the Mohawk Valley. I lived away for about 20 years working in the field of technology transfer and academic industry partnerships. I came back to the Mohawk Valley 10 months ago, almost exactly, to take on my role here at the Griffiss Institute, and couldn't be happier. Wonderful place to be. Excellent timing to be coming back to our community experiencing such a tremendous renaissance. So,
Thank you.
that's me.
Jackie?
I'm Jackie Nizzle, Mayor of the City of Rome. I've been mayor for 7 years. We're having a good time being mayor, I guess. I'm a lifelong resident of Rome and of our Mohawk Valley region. And I hope that if you haven't been here before to Innovare, this was a project taken on by the county to renovate this former base operations space, this hangar. And now it's open to the community, and we are having all different types of events here under Heather's leadership with the Griffiss Institute. We're just very proud of this space. We're supporting the Rome Laboratory, which is extremely important to us. And this, I think, is going to become the hub of activity now for the next several years. And we're really excited as to what we can offer here. So this is another important piece of real estate that has joined our community and is going to help us to bring visitors here to learn about how they can further themselves through research and development at Rome Lab, but also for our community, for the events such as this, so that we can introduce ourselves in different forums and groups in a really nice setting. So thank you for inviting me this morning, and I'll turn it over.
Hi everyone, my name is Karen Roth. I'm the Chief Engineer at the Air Force Research Laboratory Information Directorate, also known as Rome Labs to most of you out there. So my position and role, my background is I'm a software and systems engineer, and my position and role is mostly focused on not only advising our director and the rest of the directorate about engineering matters, but also working on open innovation projects like Innovare. We're so excited to be part of Innovare, what this building represents, what the concept of community building represents, and are looking forward to bringing more of our tech into the community, introducing you to who we are rather than hiding quietly behind the fence, doing our S&T over across the street, but finding great new ways to engage with the community, look for ways to bring in new products, new tech. Is also to continue to engage through all of our STEM initiatives as well that we work on with the Griffiss Institute and through Innovare. I think that's one of our favorite activities is coming out and doing the STEM events with all of the kids and getting them excited about the future of S&T and the work that we're doing in the laboratory. So that I will turn it over to Kathy Ann.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Soderbergh. I am a principal research physicist here. I'm the group leader for the Trapped Ion Quantum Networking effort. So I have a PhD in physics that I got a long time ago now. And I'm also very excited about the Innovare Center. We have quantum labs downstairs, and I think this place is going to revolutionize how we do business at AFRL, and so we couldn't be more excited to start this journey. If anyone would like a lab tour, we're happy to give it to you. Just let us know.
They have lasers. It's
We
great.
do. We have lasers. We shoot lasers at atoms. It's a lot of fun. But I came to upstate New York about 11 years ago, and I've been at AFRL for about 7, and I think it's awesome. It's the best job in the world, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I am Jamie Stasio, and I'm also honored to be here. A little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's in biology and a doctorate in physical therapy. I'm also a licensed massage therapist, and I've been owning and operating my business since 2009, so about 14 years now. It was not a straight path for me to become a fireman. And I would argue that my job is the best job. So what happened was, in PT school, I did great, but I ended up failing my licensing exam 9 times before a lifetime limit was placed on it. And I kind of had a little crisis on my hands. I appealed to the Federation of the State Boards of Physical Therapy and was granted a 10th attempt, to which I failed again by tenths of points at times. So I was devastated, and that whole process for me took a huge toll on me emotionally, intellectually, financially. It was a huge problem. So I was at home one day, and I was asking the powers that be. I sort of got, this sounds like it's a made-up story, but I said, I need a sign, and it needs to be something very clear. It needs to be so obvious that I can't deny it, and not so subtle that I would miss it, because clearly I'll take the same test over and over and not see that that is not for me. So that same day, I'm driving home, I'm on Route 49, I pulled over to a car that just looked like maybe it needed gas or a tire or something, and I found a dead woman who was overdosed on heroin. And somehow my confidence kicked in and I knew what to do, so I rescued her. I found that to be extremely thrilling. So the adrenaline kicked in, and that same day I drove straight to the firehouse, and for some reason walked into the back door awkwardly, found the first person I could find, and said, I think I need to be a fireman. This is what I have to do. So it checked all the boxes for me in terms of me being able to still have a life and not work, everything away because I still had a debt to pay. So this story and this experience for me is one of my favorite, because it wasn't just a breakthrough experience for the city of Rome in becoming the first female firefighter, but it is a personal breakthrough experience for myself. And so I guess it makes the success of it a lot more sweet, knowing that, as I pulled myself together and had to revamp my brain and everything, that it was a direct result of my efforts and my ability to be honest about my journey. Because I didn't realize that I was on a path that was more to make my parents proud than it was for me. And so once I had this experience of let me rescue somebody, I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I can be meaningful in the community and have an impact. And so here I am today. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. We're going to get more into your story too, Jamie, so that'll be fun. Thank you for sharing that.
Good morning. I am Erin Matt. That's a tough story to follow. I was going to say that I was humbled to be a part of this panel, but I am the Executive Director and CEO of United Way of the Mohawk Valley. I'm not actually originally from this area, but I've been here now for almost a decade, so it does feel like home to me. And I'm a big supporter of just this community. It's been a pleasure for me to be a part of it. So I hope that in some small way, my commitment to my role at United Way of the Mohawk Valley, that I'm helping to build bridges to drive connections in our community. That's largely what we're focused on. So I'm sure we'll talk more about backgrounds and such, but my background is actually in the tech space, so I had kind of a wandering path to get here, but that is where I am now. So Laura.
All right, yes, good morning. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm Laura Wessing. I am born and raised here in the Mohawk Valley, and then I went up to school at SUNY Potsdam, so stayed within the SUNY system, where I went to school originally to become a math teacher, but we can dig into my story a little bit later too. After that, though, I actually did an internship at the Air Force Research Lab. I went back, I changed my degree, added computer science. I graduated with a dual degree in math and computer science. And then I've been working with the Air Force Research Lab since I retired. So I am a research mathematician there. And I lead the not the Trapped Ions, wow, Kathy, you got me, Trapped Ions in my head. I lead the algorithms and software development group for quantum computing here.
I love how every single one of you ladies are up on that panel and you're talking about who you are and your pathways, and there is some little node that connects each and every single one of you, whether it be Mohawk Valley, Utica, Rome, technology, finding yourself. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit more too. So Heather, what was your pathway that led you to where you are today, and was it always clear?
No, it was not. That's a great question. So I guess if I could go back to 17-year-old me, right, is kind of where your professional, your adult journey begins. So as I mentioned, I grew up here, I lived in New Hartford, went to Notre Dame, couldn't wait to get out to the big world, right? Oh, it's so boring here in the Mohawk Valley. I can't wait to get out to the big world and see what's out there. So I made the journey to Hamilton College, about 15 minutes up the road, to go away to college. But it did feel like another world, I'll say that. You know, when you get into the community that is your college or your university where you go, that felt like another world. I did a brief stint at an investment bank where I was maybe not the worst analyst in history, but pretty close to that. And I remember calling my mother midway through my journey. I was working for an investment bank in the media and telecom division as an analyst. They were based in Paris, but had a New York office. So half the folks there spoke French. I spoke Spanish, so totally useless. Didn't feel at home there. Also was strong at math, but not the way I should have been to be an analyst. But I loved the work because I got to see a vision for big projects in media and telecom that could bring technology to change the world. That's what I fell in love with at the bank. And I got involved in a project that was designed to bring what were then, in 2001 or 2, modern telecommunication services to the African continent by laying fiber optic cable into the ocean. And if you think about what the cost of an infrastructure project like that, it was extraordinary. So these banks were trying to raise money for it. And I was so in love with the concept that we could take American technology, so accessible, that we take for granted, that we have everywhere, and change the trajectory for an entire continent of people, right? And the day that it didn't happen, the day that I found out that the deal fell apart, I was devastated. I cried all through the night, and I called my mother, that I can't be a banker. I can't do this. And she was saying to me, okay, so let's calm down. Let's take this apart piece by piece. You know how you do when you call your mother looking for advice. And she said, you know, sweetheart, there's probably another path for you. If that's what you love, you know what you loved about this. And the part that's breaking your heart is the banking side. So do something else. But I didn't know what the heck that was. So a couple years later, I decided to go to law school. I come from a family of lawyers, but I never wanted to practice. I never saw myself in a courtroom, you know, arguing with the judge or anything. It wasn't for me, but I wanted to think like a lawyer. I wanted to understand how science, technology, law, policy, all these things fit together. I went to law school and I met a gentleman after my first year, when everyone in law school is competing to get associateships at like prestigious law firms. I was like, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. I'm gonna do something cool. And I met a gentleman who ran technology transfer for the State University of New York. And that's a very long story, but I won't, there's so many other ladies with amazing stories to get into. But in the moment when he told me what he did, I was there with my awkward, like, first year law student suit, with the cheap wine at the networking thing. And I said to him, so what do you do? And I saw this gentleman who was like very dapper, and he had like that magnetism that people have, you know, people that you're attracted to. You just wanna, like, what do you do? And so I said to him, what do you do? And he said, I do technology transfer. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? It sounds like the IT department. I have no idea what that is. And he said, well, it's my job to be the business person who goes into laboratories and helps scientists and engineers take their big ideas and turn them into products and services that change the world. And in that moment, you know, like when those moments when the hair on your body stands up and you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with it. I wish I was motivated to be a firefighter. That's really cool. But it was more, I would really like to be the business person that goes into the labs and help scientists and engineers figure out how to bring all the resources together that it takes to make big technology projects happen. So I fell in love with that. I did it for 17 years. And if you told 17-year-old me, who couldn't wait to get out of New Hartford and go live a new life, that 20-some, almost 30 years later, I'd be back here renovating my grandparents' home and running a company with 3 children, I don't know that I could have pictured that. But when you know what you love and who you are, and you just let the rest kind of follow that, you go really confidently at what you know you're supposed to be doing, the rest of it kind of falls into place. So, no, my path was not straight. It was quite jagged, fraught with failure. But figuring out what you're passionate about, I think, is the antidote to not letting those failures derail you to getting where ultimately you're supposed to go.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're all little firefighters in our own way, right? Extinguishing our own internal fires, and externals. Jamie just happens to be the real life lifesaver in this case scenario. Erin, I want to get back to you because you said that you were not originally from this area, but you've been here for a decade. So was your path always clear? And I know that you've just taken on the executive director role and CEO for United Way at Mohawk Valley, but how did that path come to fruition?
Some similarities there to the kind of meandering path, maybe. So my background, again, varied experiences. I started out, so I was born in Baltimore. I grew up in the Mid-Atlantic region, but I haven't lived there since the mid-90s, so it's been a long time. After college, I was in Boston at the time, and I went into banking. And so I was in banking operations for a number of years. My husband and I, who we met in Boston, but he's from this area originally, so that was my link to upstate New York. Moved overseas, and I was in London for grad school. He was as well. I was there for almost 6 years. And so when I came back to the U.S., it was a really interesting time because the kind of economic and market turmoil of 2008 was kind of playing out. And so I was planning to go into teaching at the university level, actually. And so that was a terrible time to want to do that for anyone who's familiar with the higher ed how prioritization is made around investment and departments. But at any rate, so I found myself, connection was made, and it was kind of that same like, wow, this is really interesting. And I think, generally there are people that just have like natural curiosity just about a lot of things, and that's kind of how I am. Like, I love to learn about a really broad range of things versus, for example, going really deep into just one kind of specialist area. And so this was someone that I was talking to and said, SaaS technology, here's what it is. And right now, there's a real opportunity to develop an entirely new way of connecting people and businesses and marketing, and this was all kind of coming out of like the beginnings of social media, which it's interesting to see kind of where that's gone in the past decade. But at any rate, I started working for a SaaS technology company that was acquired by Oracle at the time, so many of you probably recognize that name. And from there, I then went to Twitter. So I worked for Twitter for 5 years and ultimately ran Twitter's business with a number of basically the world's biggest marketers. So companies like Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, L'Oreal, you all know those consumer kind of brand names. And there were some similarities, though, kind of along the way in terms of becoming a subject matter expert in various different areas. And a lot of it, though, was tied to storytelling. And so ultimately, I ended up running a sales division for Twitter. And really, that was based on being able to build connections, to tell a story, and to figure out how do you communicate value one way or another. And so after that, around that time, my husband came back to the area to come back to a family business. So that's what originally brought us here. I have 3 children, and so I was traveling quite a bit. I was traveling coast to coast, and for any working parents, specifically working moms in the room, that can be a hard balance to strike. And so an opportunity came up. Someone who's been in this community for a long time said, you seem to be really interested in establishing connections and, you're kind of a quick study when it comes to like figuring out a value proposition. I think this could be an interesting role. And so that's kind of how I was led to United Way, because at the time, a transition had happened and they were really looking to kind of rebuild, reevaluate, and kind of figure out what their story was. And so that was my segue into United Way. And United Way, for anyone who's not familiar with United Way, this is actually the Mohawk Valley's United Way's 100th anniversary. So this United Way has been here in this community bridging the region, really, so all of Oneida, all of Herkimer counties, for a very long time. But United Way is also a national and global nonprofit. But it's really rooted in local solutions, local connections, so we operate with autonomy in this region, and that allows us to focus on what matters here, and to focus on solving problems for our community right here. So I don't know if anyone, just show of hands, has anyone read the book or heard of the book called Range by David Epstein? No. Yeah, okay, well, there we go. That's appropriate, my panelists. So I think what's interesting, and what we've already heard, like from some of these stories, is that, and this might not be everyone's story, but the gist of the book is that typically varied experience or generalists win, in the sense that if you have multiple experiences and skill sets that are drawing from just a diverse set of experiences, you are often able to connect the dots and add more value than, for example, someone who might have been forced to only play the violin for 10,000 hours until they were, 7 years old, right? It's just, it's around that concept that the more interesting and varied experiences that you have to choose from, the more value ultimately you're able to deliver. So I do think that that's probably a common denominator maybe among this panel of women. But
Yeah, I see a lot of the diversity of everybody, and I know everybody here in a different way in their backgrounds, and not everybody kind of had that same set clear path. So I completely agree with you on that, and having that diversity and that broad range of skill sets to be able to really hone in on that one goal and job that they're all kind of focusing on. United Way is lucky to have you, so thank you very much for coming today. Jackie, I want to turn to you, because you are kind of a woman in history sitting on this panel as well, with Jamie being the first female mayor of the city of Rome. Did you always know that that's what you wanted to have happen and have your pathway come to where you are now?
Anyone that tells you they think they want to be a politician, no. That was probably the furthest thing from my mind. Way back when I was in high school, I was always busy. I always had 3 things going at once, so I was really a multitasker. I was always going to school, working, playing whatever sport it was in that season, with a real emphasis. I liked basketball the best, but softball was good. I played tennis. Anything that was going on. It was in the musicals. I'm working up at the 2019th. That was a communication squadron that was here long ago. Some of you may remember it. The 485th, I was over there. So when it came time to leave high school, certainly I'm not going to college too far away, because we were so bad in basketball at Rome Catholic. I said, I have got to be a basketball coach. I'm going to find a way. We are not going to be at the bottom of the barrel. So I go to Utica College, Syracuse University, went with Syracuse University, and public relations journalism school there, which was awesome. Met some really great people. One of my professors, I still see her all the time. She comes here once a week to swim at our Y, and so it's been good connections there. But I was also able to, while I'm pursuing this basketball coaching career, I had an opportunity through Utica College to work in the lab, all the way through college in an engineering type of program where I was a scenario writer, and many other things that the people on the floor decided I should be doing. It was a fantastic experience. It set me up for so many different things that have happened in my life, and it's just the oddest thing now that the lab's been a really big part of my life, and I'm back here as mayor, fully involved in this again. And I've got to tell you, these 3 ladies up here from the lab are a lot smarter than I am, and they are fantastic people. What's going on in our lab is just fantastic. So, had the opportunity to do that. By the time I was a junior in college, I was the varsity basketball coach. At that time, women's sports were like over there. We were fighting for everything, but within the first year, we made our presence known, and from there on, we did very well. And so I made sure that we left the cellar, we went to the top, and we never looked back. And so that made me happy. Probably that was my passion, was being a basketball coach. And at that time, if I had really thought about it, it would have been a great time to move into Division I. Those were the days when the Pat Summits and the Vivian Stringers, they were driving the vans, and they didn't have practice time, and so it was just a good time to build it. But from there, I worked at the Chamber of Commerce for a year. They had a staff position open, so I did that, and that was another really good job that led me to all kinds of different connections that I made throughout the community, in Utica, in our whole area, really, that I still use today. That was a really good job for somebody that wanted to be rooted in business. From there, I went to the city of Rome and became director of tourism and the Erie Canal Village, which unfortunately no longer stands. But we had a really good 6.5 years there, a lot of experience from that job, a lot of experience. And then I got a phone call. How would you like to run our hotel? I said, I know nothing about running a hotel. Oh, don't worry about it. You don't need to know too much. So then I became the general manager of the Quality Inn when it was locally owned. That job taught me that 24 hours was just a cycle. A hotel never closes. The business never closes. And I learned so much about private sector business in that job because the owners really gave us a long leash. And it was a job where you had to problem solve and then prove your point. So excellent learning experience for the next thing that I did that was probably the craziest thing ever. I decided I want to be a business owner. That would not happen today. So I venture out and had a really successful business doing medical transcription, medical records. And we were an early adopter of at-home work, remote working and remote connections, VPNs. All of this technology I kind of grew up with because I grew with it in our business because we were servicing clients. As soon as the internet came along, we were servicing clients all over the country, all over the state. We didn't need to just be servicing people that were here. And then we started to be able to hire transcriptionists from all over the country because now we had these electronic means to do that. It was secure. And then HIPAA came along. And so IT's been a big part of my life, and telephones and connectivity. So that was good. And then after about 20-some years of that, I was approached by some people in the community who were very, I would say, at a crossroads with their businesses, deciding whether they were going to stay here or leave. And they brought some things up to me about the state of the city and that they just didn't feel we could go on and the path that we were on. That not enough was happening. We had kind of stagnated. And after a while, I had to admit to them that I was seeing the same things in my own business, probably for about 18 months or so prior to that. One of the things I learned in my business, probably about, 15 years ago, was the out-migration that happens here from October to May. And it's significant. We lose a lot of population, and we weren't replacing it with younger families that actually had to stay here and work. So we had to bridge that gap. So I finally acquiesced and said, all right. It was decided I should step out of my business. They could stay in theirs, but I should step out of mine and run for mayor. I said, I am a woman. This has never been done before. I'll give you that I'm a Republican, but there's an incumbent. And ended up in a 4-way race, and we won that. But my goals for that were that the community had to make progress, or I was not going to continue doing this, because why? Then you need to step aside. And our initiatives were jobs. Everybody says jobs. We actually had to find jobs. Housing. We knew there was an issue with housing. We did not have new modern housing that people were looking for, but it was much worse when we actually were in office and started listening to people. In fact, I went to a meeting of the junior council at the lab, and the lab's a friendly place for me. Not at this meeting. They beat me up pretty good, but that was all right, because that was probably one of the best meetings we had, because I didn't realize from the time that we lost the flying mission to the BRAC to now supporting these installations of Rome Lab, EADS, and DFAS, so much had changed for them, and not so much the civilians, but the military. Some of them felt unwelcome in the community. They felt discriminated against in housing. And I'm really taken aback, and I'm just saying, well, what do you mean? And so they were telling me, and I said, wow, we've got to reverse that. So I'm really happy that we've done so many different things, but we have stayed with the core principles as to why did you want to do this, or why did you feel like you should do it? We have our community moving again. We have jobs. We have an abundance of jobs. They're coming from everywhere. We've had economic development like we haven't seen in a long time. We're moving here. Housing. We're building housing really in every quadrant of our city right now. And we're finally luring back the people that work here. A few years ago, 70% of the people that worked on this park did not live in Rome. And a lot of them did not even live in our county. We're reversing that. They're beginning to live not only here in Rome, but in other places in the county. And that was very important. So while we were growing some of the jobs, we still weren't growing the population. And so that's been our focus. And I'm proud of where we are right now. We have a lot more to do. And I think that, Heather's just the perfect person to be in this job, because we all have a sense of, there was a lot of negativity for a lot of years here. A group of us have just said, look, you can have a bad situation, but there has to be something positive you can pull out of it and work on that. And that's what we're trying to do. So that's kind of how I got here.
I think I'm going to start calling you coach, with all due respect, because I think that Rome is your Division I, and you're doing it like a zone play and bringing back economic growth and jobs, and really kind of putting that pressure on people to make those right moves. So I think your pathway, if you were to look back at it, clearly defined. You should have been here. So I'm glad that you are with us and you're not coaching an actual basketball team, because I think you're doing wonderful.
Well, the year that we made it to the New York State Final Four, we went from the absolute cellar, and that took years. And there we were. We were in Glens Falls at the Final Four, and I said, wow, I wish some of these people could see us now. Like the ones that beat us by 60, 70 points and didn't think anything about it.
Karen, you have an interesting background as well. Did you always know that you were going to be chief engineer working for Rome Labs?
And I think that's always an interesting question, because all of us kind of make that face of, no, how did I get here? I'm not entirely sure either. All the way down the line here. No, I mean, I did not grow up here in the Mohawk Valley either. I grew up in western Pennsylvania in the Pittsburgh area. I went to school in New York at RIT, so still not Mohawk Valley. So when it came time to look at jobs, I had done a bunch of different co-ops for different sized organizations. I worked for GE, I worked for a small research lab, I did some on-site research on campus, did something else I can't even remember. I just hopped around different jobs because I always loved learning. Like, yes, I was in school to be a software engineer, and I loved engineering, but in general, just understanding how the world worked was of interest to me. So when it came time to pick a job, okay, this one pays me, was the starting criteria for that. And so it's, but really, like, I had a couple different options. My number one priority was definitely to get paid. I liked that coming out of college, figuring out how to pay my college debt and these engineering degrees and everything like that. But when I looked at them, I was still in a phase where genuine engineering of large-scale software systems still wasn't a concept. Like, I had done a lot of more IT-related jobs. Here, can you script this thing to do this specific thing for me? And so I thought that's where a path I was headed to, that's what I had trained to do, but when I came here to the lab to interview, I had just wandered up to someone from the lab at a conference and said, the Air Force sounds interesting, tell me more, and he happened to be from Rome, and in my head I thought, well, I'm not moving there. But when I actually came out the lab to talk to them, I was so blown away by the mission space and the opportunity to build the level of systems that we do here and have the level of impact not only on a specific thing that you're looking at one day, but also looking out into the future. A lot of strategy work goes into what we do in order to build from the tech that we have today to our future tech, and the level of interactions, like it just blew me away. And so when I came on board and started looking around and looking at the opportunity, I started as a research scientist, but I also was doing a lot of other various projects throughout the lab, like mini projects here and there. Can I help with this? Can I help with this? Just trying to learn everything that the lab was about. And I actually ended up getting my master's in engineering at the lab as well, and really figuring out that that is what I wanted to focus on, was not just computer programming, but genuine engineer and architecture of systems. And I haven't coded for probably 15 to 20 years at this point in time, even though I am a software engineer, because that focuses on that architecture and that large-scale system development that actually doesn't start with just opening up a computer and coding, it turns out. But after a while, I wanted to do more things where I saw the end result. And I met my husband here in the Mohawk Valley, but we decided we wanted to explore other opportunities. And so I actually left the laboratory for a period of time. I went to work for Sikorsky Aircraft out in Connecticut, where I started off on an international program because I wanted to do something different. Try something different, see what was out there. And then they ended up moving me on to an Air Force program. And I was like, okay, I think I've been here. I think this is probably what I'm meant to be doing. But it was like coming home from a sense though too, because I know how to speak this language, I know how to work with these folks, I know how to make a difference, I know how to make an impact, and move things forward for them. And so that coming home feeling was really great because I knew how to make an impact in that environment. And then we decided we wanted to move back to New York because he was from New York, and he looked at me one day and he said, I just want to live in the state of New York. Pick something in the state of New York. We'll figure this out, but I need to be in that state. This is my comfort zone. He didn't care where, kind of thing. But we ended up coming back to this area. I interviewed in Syracuse, I interviewed here, I interviewed out in Albany. And again, that comfort factor came back into play where, I'm from a rural area in Pennsylvania, and so between his family being an hour from here and our comfort with the area, that this continued to make sense. And I still saw the job opportunities, I saw the changes that Jackie was starting to make with the city and how Rome was evolving, and I could picture myself coming back here and having more job opportunities because I still didn't come back to the lab. I actually came back and worked for another defense contractor for a year, thinking that I still wanted to do this, that, or the other thing and bounce around a little bit. And a year into that job, someone from the lab emailed me and said, I know that you're back in the area. Based on what you've done for us before, you know this job's opening, right? I said, sure, but you're not going to give that to me. I know I have the right background, but it doesn't make sense for me, I don't think. And so after a couple more communications, I said, well, it's worth the conversation. What could be wrong with a conversation? And so somehow I'm here today talking to you all. But what really drew me to continue to come back and apply and come back to the lab again was the breadth of depth of community building that would be part of this position, not only getting to work and help direct what the laboratory does on a day-to-day basis, but also that I could have my own projects to work to build ourselves out in the community. One of those things that I had seen that was missing before, of taking advantage of everything that we have to offer, not only here, but on a state and domestic level too, and bringing that more together in a picture. Because from my standpoint as an engineer, it's just building the puzzles. Like, how can I put my puzzle together to have the largest scale impact? And that's not just the tech for me, that's the community, that's the people, that's, you know, projects that are being run in academia, that's all of the soft skills that come along with English background. My grandmother was a business English teacher, and so I'm the only engineer that you're gonna find that can spell, because it was drilled into me from day one. And so, like, all of those soft skills background for me is what was really bringing that puzzle. And the engineering piece for me was engineering this community to be, that the laboratory could be part of in a new and different way. And so that was what really drew me to coming back to the lab and back to this position here today.
I love that all roads lead back to Rome, right? No matter where you go, no matter what you've done, all those roads have led back here to Rome. And I am extremely envious of and proud of you for having those opportunities and taking kind of those leaps of faith, right? In the back of your mind, you were thinking, can't be for me, there's no way I can do it. But you took that leap of faith and you did it anyways, and you opened up those doors for yourself that were presented in front of you. So thank you.
I do want to be clear, there was a lot of panicking going on in my mind.
But you did it with grace and confidence, which is wonderful. Kathy, and I want to bring it to you. You are a physicist, and when you started, I mean, and I say this with a little bit of context and background, Kathy Ann is head of our quantum lab here at the Innovare Advancement Center, and this isn't out in the public just yet, but they've done their first trapped ion, which to general layman people, to me, it's exciting. I still have no clue what it is. It's just exciting to say we've done our first trapped ion here at the Innovare Advancement Center. It's the third time AFRL has done it, but when you started in the physicist world, way back when, thinking of everything quantum, was it planned in your vision board that this is what you would be doing, and the pivotal, pinnacle research that you are playing a part of that's really going to advance technology and bring us into the next era? Is this what you thought and envisioned when you were a little girl?
No, I mean, so I think back, looking back, at the time it felt like I took a huge right turn, left turn all over the place, but as I look back now, it was more of a gentle meander compared to some of my other candidates. So I first learned so I trap atoms for a living, that's what we do. Single atoms, you know, they're like the building blocks of life. We can trap them and we can see them. So I first learned about atoms in middle school, actually. Our science teacher, we did a project on it, I was like, whoa, that's so cool. There's like this whole world around us that we're more or less oblivious to. And then I didn't think about it for a long time, but then when I got into college, I had the opportunity to work in an undergraduate lab that had lasers, and they looked at atoms differently than we do today, but it was still atomic physics. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool. And the lab is interesting. You know, my other love in life is TV, really. And the movie Real Genius was one of my favorites around that time, so I'm dating myself. But when I walked into the lab, it looked just like the one in Real Genius. And I was like, whoa, this is the lab from the movie. And the professor at the time was like, oh, and it actually is, because I used to be in California, and I was a professor there, and I knew the set guy, and he used my lab as a model. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I need to be in this lab. So he offered me a job, and I had no idea what I was doing. But he very graciously offered me a job. And so I worked in that lab for 4 years. And then I knew I wanted to stay in physics because it was so much fun. And so I started to look at graduate schools. And at the time, I always wanted to be a professor. I had nothing else on my mind other than to go from point A to point B and be a professor and have a research group and teach. And so I visited a bunch of graduate schools, and I ended up at the University of Michigan in a trapped ion lab, which is what I do now. So I went, you know, I've been doing that ever since pretty much, and I loved it. Like, we could trap single atoms, so you can't see that many places in your life. Like, literally a single atom shows up on the screen and you can see it. It's on a camera, and it blew me away. You know, I thought back to middle school, and I was like, whoa, these are the atoms that we talked about. It just takes my breath away still to this day, even though we trap a lot of them. And so what we do is we manipulate atoms, single atoms, with laser beams, and like, we can make them do what we want for quantum information purposes. And so I thought that was so cool. So I spent, you know, 6 or 7 years in grad school doing that. And then I took a postdoc at the University of Chicago in a similar but slightly different area, still atomic physics and shooting lasers and stuff. And then someone else was talking about higher education and the difficulties in getting into higher education. It was a terrible time when I was a postdoc. My husband's also a physicist. We met in grad school, so we were both looking for jobs. And it just wasn't going to happen. It was obvious to me that it was never going to happen. So I had to open my mind a little bit. And someone actually from a defense contractor, similar to what Karen said, came to me and they're like, oh, we're looking for people with quantum backgrounds. And I was like, whatever, I'm never going to do that. I want to be a professor. But I told them thanks, and I'd think about it. And after a few months, I was like, oh, I should probably look into that because this professor thing is probably not going to happen. There were no jobs available, basically. There's like 1,000 applicants in one job. And so I got back in touch with them, and within 3 months, I think they had hired me, and I started working as a technical consultant, still in quantum and atomic physics. And I think that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me so much more breadth in the area of quantum. Like as a PhD, as you can imagine, you focus really hard on one very specific thing for so many years of your life, and then they give you your PhD, and you're like, great. But then at the defense contractor, I was able to expand quite a bit my knowledge base in quantum, and it really taught me how to be a better physicist, how to be a better communicator of science. And really in that job, you get to help shape science. I think that's phenomenal, right? You work with the government, you're kind of their right-hand person to shape the programs that they're forming and help them run them, which are some like the most amazing scientific results that have come out from anywhere are funded by these programs. And so I was there for a few years, but then my husband in that same time got a job at Syracuse University. And I apologize, at the time I was like, I don't know where Syracuse is on the map. But let's go. So he got a job as a professor, and then I was able to work remotely for a few years, but it wasn't a long-term thing. And so once I got here, I started to talk to some of the quantum folks at the lab, and I started a relationship with them. And then a job opened up, and they were like, do you want to come do research? And I was like, yes, I absolutely want to come do research. And so looking back, I'm not very far from where I wanted to be, running a research group. It was a much different path. At the time, like Heather said, right, it feels devastating because you're just like, this is what I want to do. You have blinders on, and I'm going to do it, period. Right? And we keep trying and trying and failing, and we're like, oh, no, I want to do it. So I'm really happy that I'm here. And yeah, it's awesome. It's better than I think anything else I could do.
Yeah, perseverance comes to mind when I think of you, because you were constantly going forward, and you had that dream as you were a little girl of what you wanted to do, and it was in that realm and that wheelhouse, but you always kind of persevered all the way through. So thank you for joining us today. Laura, I'd like to talk with you because I know your backstory. I know your dad, Mike Wessing, works here. I've heard this story before, and every time that I hear it and he tells it, I'm still enamored by it because you had a vision, and your family had a vision and a path for you to go one particular way, and your dad was kind of a strong advocate, be like, no, don't go into the lab. Go, as children and as parents, we always want our children to do something different than what we have done. So when my kids tell me that they want to go do something that I've done already, I'm like, no, don't do that. Go be your own path. Don't make those mistakes. But it wasn't a mistake. You kind of went with your gut. You knew what you wanted. You had a taste of a different life, but then you got a little dabble of some research lab life and physicist work. So can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, I went to school originally. I wanted to be a math teacher. My mom is an early childhood education teacher. My aunt is a math teacher. I looked up to all of them. Math was the love of my life. I did all throughout high school. I went to Westmoreland, so I was local. And then after my first year in college, my father looked at me and was like, you're not going to just come home and sit on the couch all summer. You have to get a job. And so I was like, well, schools aren't really in session. I didn't really want to go and work at like Burger King or anything. I really wanted to do something with math. So I looked around and I saw, well, AFRL takes interns that are mathematicians through the Griffiss Institute. So I called up my father and I was like, I think I'm going to apply. Because at the time, he worked at AFRL. And he looked at me and was like, okay, but you're not going to get it. And I was like, wow, thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm still going to apply. But ultimately, he was like, we aren't really looking for teachers. We're looking for a lot of computer scientists. You really have no background. I could barely turn on a computer at the time. I felt like, and so I was like, I'm still going to apply. It's better than if I was working at Burger King or McDonald's or something else. So I applied, got an email, and I was selected. So I called up Dad and I was like, I was selected. And Dad was like, oh crap, she doesn't know anything about computers. So he called up to the Griffiss Institute and was like, she doesn't know anything about computers. But ultimately they gave me this phenomenal lieutenant who I was working with. He gave me a mathematics problem, and then on the side, he taught me how to program. So every morning we would come in, he'd do a little coding lesson for me, but ultimately the big structure of my project was a mathematics problem. So I had to figure out the mathematics in the problem, and then on the side he was teaching me how to actually program it for the needs and stuff that they had. I loved it. It was the best. And that's when I went back and I was like, all right, I'm changing my degree. And my dad was like, but wait, you love math. And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep math, but I'm gonna drop the education, and I actually added computer science. So I still have that love of teaching. I do a lot of STEM outreach and stuff through my job and everything here, but that second summer, after my sophomore year, after now I've taken a couple of courses in computer science, I applied again at the Air Force Research Lab through the Griffiss Institute. Got picked up for another internship where I was looking at mathematics and programming and stuff again. And then coming into my next summer, my dad looked at me and was like, all right, you can't come back to AFRL. And I was like, well, this kind of stinks. I was really liking it. But ultimately, at the time, the government was on their hiring freeze. And so he was like, you really need to strengthen your resume. You need to broaden your view. It goes back to that breadth and everything. He goes, although our internships are great, most likely we're not going to be able to hire you when you actually graduate. So I went out. I got an internship with industry here in Rome. And it was actually a defense contracting company who was looking at quantum computing for the Air Force. And did the Air Force want to purchase a quantum computer or not? I hadn't stepped foot in a physics class since high school. Did not take any physics, did not like physics, but I really started to dig into these computers. I started to look into what could they do, how do you program them? It's a fundamentally different way of programming them, and I fell in love. And so it's actually, I went full circle from that defense contracting is how I came and I became connected back with the actual quantum team at AFRL. And when I graduated, I was able to, they had openings and I got picked up. And so I've been with them ever since. And then like I said, because this was not my path, I was not looking at this at all, I do a lot of STEM outreach and stuff. So I still work, I do a lot with a lot of the local high schools, I do a lot through the different colleges, and I've led a lot of the quantum workforce development efforts in order to try to bring people into and expose them to these other different ideas, because this was not the path I thought I was going to be on at all, but I love it.
Nice. I love your story, and when I hear it every single time, the meme from Friends comes to mind of that one with Chandler and Ross, the pivot, it worked out in your case. It was wonderful. I really do love it. There's a lot of influential energy in this room, up here, behind us in the audience, as we're streaming this. If we can kind of go down the line, and Jamie, we'll start with you, but if you could give one piece of practical advice to individuals listening in and hearing that would benefit them, that you've come across, what would that be?
I would say to stay authentically interested and open, and surround yourself with the people who will challenge and motivate you.
Thank you. Erin? Same question.
I think I would say seek to make an impact. So whether that is within your immediate family or your community where you live, or it's through what your employment opportunities are, I think that we are only as successful as the legacy that we build. So seek to make an impact in the best way you can.
I like it. How about yourself, Laura?
All right, I would have to say to never stop learning. Ultimately, when you, especially if you go on for higher education and stuff, but at the end of the day, again, my father used to always tell me a degree is just a piece of paper that you're gonna walk out with. After you defend, if you get your PhD, someone's gonna read your dissertation, you're gonna be the expert at that moment in time. But then they're always expanding. There's always knowledge to take in and learn, and to never stop learning.
Yes. Heather?
All good points. I would say it's one thing, decide. Decide who you are, what you stand for, what your family's gonna stand for, what your business is gonna stand for. And once you make that decision, then go absolutely ruthlessly at executing on that. So what that looks like in my life is, in my family, we are kind, gentle, safe, and respectful. And when any of us acts outside those boundaries, we hold each other accountable to that. So when my 7-year-old punches my 9-year-old, And I say, what are we in this family? We're kind, gentle, safe, and respectful. Was that kind? Was that gentle? Was it safe? Was it respectful? No. Then why did you do it? And you reflect on that. And I do that. I know who I am. I know what I want my family to be. I know what I want this place to be. And I think it's if you want to set a tone, I think as the other said, where you want to be comfortable, you want to be happy in what you're doing. It's not about, when I use the word decide, it's not decide what your career path is going to be. As you hear from us, you're not making that decision. It's not up to you. But if you decide what you stand for and you hold yourself and the people who are around you accountable to those things, then you can get to a level of comfort that will set you free from a lot of the confusion that you can otherwise experience in your life. So, it's one word.
Decide, I like it. Jackie, one piece of practical advice?
Follow your passion. And that may change, but follow your passion, because you can't be doing something that you don't like. And keep an open mind, because it changes. And as the late Pat Summitt used to say, remember, you have never arrived. Don't ever think you've arrived. And to your point, keep on learning. Somebody can always teach you something, and there's always someone in your life that has a better idea on something. But you have to be true to yourself. If you're not true to yourself and you're not happy with who you are, then you can't perform well. And I think you need to be passionate and dedicated to whatever it is that you're doing. And I will tell you that the first day that Kathy captured that ion at the lab, it was a big deal. Colonel Lawrence called me and said, "You're not going to believe it, we just captured an ion." I said, "Oh, fantastic." So just let you know how excited he was.
Karen, do you have one piece of practical advice you'd like to share?
I think from my perspective, I appreciated the comment that Erin made about being a generalist. And, you know, as technologists, we're taught to go very deep into our technology area, and that's what it's all about. Like, if you're going to go to engineering school, I think I took, 2, maybe 3 liberal arts classes as part of the entire 5 years that I was in school, and that's to be your entire focus. But really, I am a better engineer, I'm a better technologist because of my love of everything else in life and learning about that as well. And being able to put that all in, because I have a very strong English background and communication background from my grandmother. My dirty little secret is I had way better school scores in English and literature than I ever did in math and science in school. But it was one of those, my passion really was more on the math and science, and I wanted to find those ways to strengthen those areas, and I saw it all coming together at the end of the day. And so how do you keep that lifelong learning and bring it in? And so every single job interview that I've been on in my life, and I've been on, I can't even tell you countless how many job interviews, just trying to figure out what options there were in life. I mean, there was stuff that ran into dead end and it was fine for both of us. But a lot of them are like, well, you're an engineer, like, we expect you to do and look like this if you're an engineer. And some of it was physical look as well, let's be fair. And I just never fit that mold because I had so much of a different background. But by being able to stay true to myself and keep talking about what my strengths were, I was able to find the right jobs for me. And go through that and move on when it wasn't the right job, and advocate for myself in a way that is probably unusual for someone in my career to be able to do that. And so it led me to a job that really is perfect for my skill sets, and being able to do what I do with this team of great women every single day, and I appreciate that greatly. So that generalist and learning and communications and everything that everyone else has said all coming together in one.
Thank you. Kathy Ann?
Yeah, mine would be don't be afraid to fail. You know, you're almost certainly going to fail at some point in your life, but you just have to get back up and keep trying. And the other one would be very comfortable being uncomfortable. Because people are going to ask you how to do things, you don't necessarily know how to do them, but don't turn down the opportunity. Just say, sure, I'll do it, and figure it out. You're going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to learn from that discomfort and figure out how to do it, so that the next time you can say, yeah, I can do that.
Well, no one knew how to trap an ion, so.
I always live by the motto of inspire yourself, and in doing so, attention goes where energy flows. So So if you surround yourself with good people, you're going to attract that good energy and that good vibe. So I appreciate each and every one of you spending the last hour with myself and us today to go ahead and inspire us with your stories, your energy, and your goal setting. We're going to allow this opportunity for just an open social time. I know that some folks have some places to go, so we'll let the panelists go around and be able to converse and network with one of you. If you have questions, I really do encourage you to at least go up to each and every one of them and say hello, greet yourselves, and introduce and have that conversation. A lot of this information, some of it I knew, some of it I didn't. I really enjoyed hearing everybody's backstory and understanding where they came from and what they want to go ahead and do. And I'd love to have you ladies back on too to talk about goal setting and what is the next step from here. So thank you very much for coming in today.